today, and welcome to Step Into Your Life with Julianne Williams. As many of you know, I devoted essentially my whole adult life and career to helping people in skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities in long-term care. Helping the elderly infirm was one of my missions because of my great-grandma who came over from the Armenian genocide. Her name was Sermon Higgin, and she was in a nursing home when I was little. And she really is my hero still to this day. And as I became more involved in the skilled nursing healthcare arena, I learned a lot about some of the debilitating illnesses that we were providing care to people who were in the middle of experiencing. And not all of them are well known, and not all of them are well funded. In the end, every single person that I had the pleasure and privilege of being a part of their care team was a person just like you and I. And so it's really important that we learn about all different kinds of things that are out there that can affect our health on the long term. And today we have a really amazing guest, very incredible man who is named Dr. George Ackerman. He is Sharon's son, George. Sharon Ackerman, his mother, had the experience of Parkinson's disease. And Sharon's son, George, was her caregiver. He's now put out a really wonderful book called A Son's Journey, Parkinson's Disease, Caregiver to Advocate. And he's here to talk with us today about Parkinson's disease. Many people are aware of some celebrities that have it. I'm going to let George tell us more about it. But I am so thankful to have you today because, number one, you're such a lovely role model for people in terms of the caregiving world, the sacrifices that you made and what you've learned, and then the mission work that you're doing so that your mom, Sharon, is not forgotten, but also that other people will benefit from the experience that your family has had. So thank you for being with me today.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be with you and your audience. We send our love and support always, but I think your show is special, extra special, not just because we got to speak before, but it really concentrates on an area that I think we need 10 times more awareness for, and that's grief. Unfortunately, it's 4 years since my mother passed on 1/1/2020 due to Parkinson's, and I'm still grieving 4 years later.
Yeah.
She was my best friend, and I don't think there is any way I'll ever, I feel like honestly, you'll probably be able to help me cope with this, but when she passed, a part of me also passed. A new part of me has blossomed in the world of advocacy, but there's no seat at the table, unfortunately, for my mother at holidays and big moments in our lives. And this book means the world to me. And I'm 6'2", 200 pounds in law enforcement, but when I talk about it, sometimes it's not easy. And I have a big mouth at times, and I'm proud of it because I like to speak out and speak up for those who might not have a voice or those who might be kind of timid and shy. And I have really set my life in the future in a positive manner to help be a voice for others in memory of my mother, but all those who we've lost, unfortunately, due to the disease. And again, I feel like there needs to be more with the grief community out there. I always say we have a beginning, a middle, and end of life, but unfortunately, the end is the one that no one talks about. And I love tackling those tough topics because my mother, in my opinion, was a saint because she was able to tackle some of the tough things like a will, even the funeral, a lot of things that would have been even more of a burden later on. But as we unfold the story, if we have the time, it wasn't, obviously always easy. And today I fight though for those who are diagnosed and those caregivers, but also in memory, unfortunately, of the millions of families who are still out there but lost their loved one due to this horrible disease.
Well, you know that my heart aches for you for the
Thank
loss of
you.
your mother. And it does, 4 years is not that long. So for people who are in the middle of their grief journey or have just begun their grief journey or 10 years into their grief journey, there is no timeline. And early grief is really the first 2 years. And sometimes, 5 years is early grief for people. So we all have our own way of getting through and into our feelings around grief. So when you say it's only been 4 years, 4 years, or, that's not very long. And
Right.
you're right. Each person that we lose has just makes a big gaping hole in our life, and we don't ever get over it. And I remember I can't tell you how many people told
Yeah.
me
Mhm.
after my husband died, you're going to get over it and you're going to find another nice man to marry. But it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah.
um Nobody is replaceable, everybody is special.
Sorry for your loss, but I still think what you're doing is amazing, and I think we still need a lot more discussion. So again, today is incredible, but I don't think this discussion ends today. Obviously, I'm going to share it throughout the world forever, but it has to be a continual talk until there's an end to this horrible disease as well.
I agree. So would you like to introduce your story and a little bit about Parkinson's so that our
Sure.
audience understands what it is that we're trying to get out there and advocate for?
Of course, my mother had approximately 15 years of Parkinson's. Unfortunately, the first seven, I heard of the word, but I wasn't aware myself, which is a part of the problem. Now, we don't know if my mother, just wasn't really aware either of how bad it could get, or the problem is we've relied on several experts that said you don't die of Parkinson's, you die from it. But my mother had no other medical issues her whole life. And then if we get to the causes, we can talk a little bit. But so she had it for 15 years. For 7 years, she only had tough ability and stiffness in her left arm, but it wasn't so bad where she had to have, someone watching her. She still lived independently, still drove, she still met her friends, shopped, no problem. Unfortunately, the last 4 years is when I had to take over in a way her life. And again, I don't think I would be the man I am today if it wasn't for my mother's sacrifices. So when it came time, I was honored to be there for her, and I would do it all again in a minute, even though it was very, very tough to be there and to see her go through this. So she went from being, after, those 4 years, the last four, somebody who could walk a few miles to a cane for 2 years, then the walker, then a wheelchair, and then bed bound the last 7 days. She, so some of the other symptoms are, and this doesn't happen with everyone, so that's another problem why we don't have a cure. Everybody's so different. We have similarities, but nothing alike. She had a stiffness in her body, rigidity, so imagine somebody walking, but literally can't move. So your brain is kind of in your own head saying go, but your body won't function. That's
Okay.
another sign. Also dystonia, dyskinesia with the curling of the toes. So her toes kind of curled on their own. She couldn't, it wasn't stop or preventable. And then also the big one, which many people are aware of, Mr. Michael J. Fox, the famous actor who has external tremors, and that's one of the more horrific signs because that's what kind of stops people from being able to have a career. They have to leave their jobs. Some feel ashamed. Again, my mother, I'm not sure if she was ashamed or just in a way didn't want to burden the family, which I wish she did. So the reason I learned about all this and dived into it head first, like the book addresses, is we tried everything. And unfortunately, finally she decided to try a trial at a university, which I don't name because I'm not upset at the schools or the doctors. It's not their fault. I just hate Parkinson's disease. That's the nicest way to say it without cursing. And
Yeah.
I have a shirt that says, the letter F, and then you can use your imagination for the rest of PD.
Yeah.
So that night she came home. I don't know. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. She, I think they might have changed her medication too drastically, and I was called over to her house at 4 a.m. It was an emergency, and I got there. And my background as an attorney, police officer, now reserve, and as a professor, and my PhD is in criminal justice. And I might have been trained million emergency situations, but never for this. I arrived at about 4 a.m. I saw my mother outside moving her furniture, and I ran up to see what was wrong, not knowing what the heck was going on. She said, "There's Nazis inside," and she's in fear of her life. So I just was in shock and kind of didn't know what to do or say. I rushed her to the hospital and found out that she could have passed that night, so we saved her life. But unfortunately, that was where her health just kind of went on a downward spiral the next 4 years. And it wasn't even that was horrifying, but then we realized she had late onset dementia, and I dropped her at the hospital. So I went back home to get her some clothes, thinking I just a quick get stuff and go. Well, to my shock, and another part of why I still am haunted at night, I don't sleep many nights and grieving over this, is her room was surrounded by post-it notes like we used to maybe remind us that we have a talk tonight. Well, she had notes surrounding the room like Beautiful Mind, the movie, and on each note was names of people and animals that might have had in her past, and she wasn't sure if they were alive at that point or there. And dementia, unfortunately, brought delusions and hallucinations that not only complicated Parkinson's, but broke my heart. And that was the literal minute I knew that this is beyond me and I needed to help my mother in any way I could. So the next 4 years, unfortunately, I go much deeper into the book, which is, I didn't really plan on writing a book, but I did write, the last year I wrote a journal only to myself and literally wrote the date, timestamp of what my days were like, the pain, the suffering, the anguish, the grief, and the little moments of happiness. But it was definitely a very tough time, and we wouldn't even have. I would speak for 12 hours. You wouldn't want me back, but so much to talk about, which is why I'm so honored that there's a book out there now that if people do want to pick up, it's just it'll tell you much more. But I do want to end that note with there is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel of darkness. Unfortunately, we no longer have my mother, but the people like you who have now inspired me and really drive me to keep pushing for others is why I do this. And I want to thank you again and your listeners for that.
Oh, well, George, thank you. It's really important for, I think, us to understand. So, and maybe you can kind of give us a feel, but you said some of the signs is the rigidity, the curling of the toes, maybe some of those tremors. Is there anything else that people should watch out for where they need to consult their physician?
Yeah, the main problem with Parkinson's disease is there's actually no test for Parkinson's. So what medical doctors do, and there are movement disorder specialists, but again, they'll take an individual, they'll do several tests for diseases and other problems, and then if it's not that, they're ruled out, and guess what? You have Parkinson's, which is not very efficient or effective. And the problem is we have many misdiagnosed people, we have late diagnosis, and then if you're given medication for something you don't have, I mean, it happened the other day. Somebody I know, they were told they have Parkinson's, and now it's they don't have Parkinson's, and they're confused because they feel that they have Parkinson's. And unfortunately, you need to catch us early. Now we have no cure, but there are many ways we'll get to. I hope health, such as fitness and diet, can slow the progression. So this is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world. So it's not just the U.S. There's approximately 1 million people in the U.S., but 10 million globally, which is why 2 years ago I changed my thinking and I decided it's not just about my mother and I anymore. It's about everybody and how we're a family in this fight. And I had the honor of interviewing 600 people around the world from Spain, Japan, Italy, England, France, Iceland, Australia. And unfortunately, Parkinson does not discriminate. It can get anywhere to anyone. And some of the reasons we don't think it's genetics, but we do feel, and I personally feel it's environment, whether it's the water we drink, whether it's the pesticides on the fruit we buy. My mother had a really nice home in Boca Raton, Florida, but for 20 years it had mold and termites, and she had to have things sprayed. Who knows, to be honest, what the heck they put in it. I am confident that's what did it. So now we try hard to, live a life ignoring or not ignoring, but trying to fight those things. But it's not easy. I mean, as you know, if you go to the shopping center, they target a lot of us. I mean, if I see fruit there, I buy it. Some days I forget to wash it. Well, guess what? There's a chance that that could have things like Parkinson's in it. And the shocking one last week, a doctor I interviewed, an expert in the field, told me that even your dry cleaning and the chemicals. So now when I get my dry cleaning, you're supposed to take the plastic off, let it sit outside for a little while. The other day I forgot my clothes outside. I forgot all
Oh,
that. But
no.
anyway, but when he said it, I had a suit on because it was a really nice, it was a speech we talked and I wanted to take the suit off and burn it.
Oh, no.
It's a lot of things around us we don't even realize or unfortunately take the time. And one last thing is the most important thing right now is how we need to talk about it's not elderly man's disease, Parkinson. We're trying to concentrate more today on females with Parkinson's because that's an issue that needs to be brought out in the light a lot more. And also different vulnerable populations who don't have the ability to find, movement specialists in their neighborhood. They did, and I'll get to advances later.
Okay. Well, and that to your point, I mean, a lot of medicine, and I don't want to get political or whatever, but a lot of
Yeah.
medicine does center around a male's physiology, right? And that's just how studies are done and all that. But as we're learning, men and women have different ways of experiencing certain diagnosis or coming about. So I'm glad that there is some focus on that as a female. I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear that, because we do need to take care of ourselves. Now, like you said, I really am a fighter for grief and mental health. Those are my
Mhm.
mission work things that I do. And so when I hear your story, obviously we're just connected because of the grief aspect and because it's not just the fact that you lost your mom, but you probably have a lot of grief over
Right.
things that happened before that because you didn't know because she was wanting to protect you or whatever her reason was. You probably have grief over the caregiving process. You have grief over the fact that she's not here. You have grief that your your mission changed. You went from being the caregiver to then not sort of having to take those next steps because you were so all in, and then now you've gotten to this advocate phase. And so when I think of you, I just, there's so much loss that I know that you've experienced, and I am so sorry that you have had to endure all of that.
I appreciate it, and I also send my love and support for your loss. It means a lot to me that you were able to share with me, and also, like I said, people like you. I don't know about me, but Mr. Michael J. Fox are my heroes because you have issues in life that are tragic, but instead of kind of not nothing against people who do, but you have your voice, and your husband still will always have a place in all of our hearts, and Mr. Fox, could have really, and there are celebrities who have just kind of went on his life, never been in the spotlight, or he didn't do that. He fought back. He's raised over $2 billion, not 2 million. And I had the honor a month or two ago to meet with him, and it was really changed my life. But unfortunately, even that day, I felt so excited, but at the same time, heartbroken because I saw what it's doing to him. He
Yeah.
had young onset Parkinson's, so he had it in his 30s, and also, he won an award recently, and it was sad because it was the first time I saw they had to bring him out in a wheelchair. And those are the things that break my heart and hate. I want this to end. I want him to be healthy. I want him to be able to not worry about this. And I love the Michael J. Fox, their slogan or mission says, "We're going to be there until Parkinson's is not." And that's what I live by every day. And unfortunately, I have a lot of issues where like even caregiving and now advocacy, where the rule, like is take care of yourself first, or you're no good to the others. But I don't do that, and I don't have any regrets. But there are days where I'm, like even tonight, everyone, it's Friday night. I'm sure we both have things, families and things, but we both want to put this in front. And it's sometimes been a struggle because even my wife, she's been my most incredible supporter. But we even had a talk recently that she thinks I'm doing too much, and I agree. But every time I take a break or rest, because I have my own medical issues with my back, I think of everyone else out there still battling Parkinson's, and I say, you know what, forget my back. This is more important, and I just don't want anyone to have to, I'll keep saying it, go through this disease, or at least feel that they're alone because they're not. And I wish I had met you, years ago because, this is important stuff. But I'm grateful that we had the chance now.
I am as well. So, when I think people have this vision of what Parkinson's is in their mind, and to your point, it's so absolutely heart-wrenching to see Michael J. Fox the way he is now, but also to be so inspired by the courage that he has had and the difference that he is making. and then, people like you, that you have the firsthand experience with your mom and caregiving, it all matters. When you think back to caregiving, and for just a minute, as a former healthcare person, when you were taking care of your mom, how did you keep your mind in a place where you were, could stay patient, stay kind, and also just, it's just 24/7, 365. It is so much more than even one person should be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was very hard. I even have a little passage I can read. It's on September, if you don't mind,
Oh, I'd love it.
September 25th, 2019. Saw mom today with the kids, and she was 100% fine and happy. After we left, the nurse, we had aides. It wasn't really a nurse, but the nurse reported to me that mom lost it. It couldn't understand where she was, didn't know where she was going to live, and was delusional. Whenever she is with us, she's fine, but the disease is horribly fascinating, terrible, frustrating, and baffling. And that really just takes you into what I was thinking on that specific day. But it was definitely not easy. I mean, I had like the world on my shoulders, and I could take it because, again, I've gone through a lot of my own life experience, whether I wanted to quit, law school, I wanted to quit the police, I wanted to quit the PhD, but my mother was always right by my side, pushing me to keep fighting on. She didn't want me to be in policing, by the way, because it's so dangerous.
I
And my,
know.
nice Jewish mom is the last place you want your kid, even though I have like reddish blonde hair, I don't look like him. But so she didn't like that part. But I mean, there were days where I wanted to quit, give up. I was angry not at her, but at the disease. I had every time we had hope, it got crushed when something failed. We tried everything from massage therapy to physical therapy to chiropractor to needles for pain because she also thought she had fibromyalgia, which was terrible. And then the stomach was destroyed because of the disease. And then I swore and we kept our promise we'd never put her in a home. But there were days I told my wife I might go look at them, but I felt like I was betraying my mother. And then my mother was like the sweetest, kindest person I've ever met. Even she was very angry. And one time she took a little light and threw it against the wall and broke it because she was frustrated at the disease. And we didn't know it was going to happen. We were never told she was going to pass. She was only 69, which is so young. And I feel like we were really robbed, for 10 years of her or 15 years of her life and another 15 after. So
Yeah.
that angers me. But then again, the only reason I'm able to grieve and cope today is advocating for others, and doing the 600 interviews was changed my life because now we see other people out there who they realize they're not alone. And by posting their information and their journeys, that inspires other people. And now I've actually shifted the focus. This book, The Son's Journey, was really dedicated to my mother, but for everyone diagnosed and those caregivers alive. Well, I had an experience which wasn't very nice, which I don't know if we'll have time for, but maybe for the future. But I just still feel alone some days. I'm not diagnosed with Parkinson. God forbid I could get in the future. We don't know. And I'm not a caregiver of someone alive, but there's a population out there like me who are people who lost a loved one due to Parkinson's, and a lot of the organizations, I love them, but they don't have a seat at the table for me. And I feel that all those who we've lost their battle, it's not their fault, but they still should have a seat at the table, and all the families still matter. And that's what the next book is literally already done. I'm waiting because I'm actually releasing 4 books on all the interviews I've done. We're working on a children's book in the perspective of a grandmother and the grandkids.
I
And
love.
I have a groundbreaking one is policing in Parkinson, because I actually have the manual for training because I was an academy teacher, and they list dementia and Alzheimer's, but they don't mention Parkinson. So guess what? If a police officer at 2 or 3 a.m. pulls someone over and the individual is shaking uncontrollably, that officer may be in fear of their own life safety and think the person might be intoxicated while driving or drugged. And guess what? It's not. It's Parkinson's, and that can end very badly. So my dream and goal is to try to work with the Michael J. Fox Foundation and change the laws throughout the United States someday, and implement the word Parkinson's into every police academy throughout the nation. That's something I'm going to probably start working on soon, but there's so much that needs to be done. We just don't have enough time.
Yeah, and we do. When we're advocating, we have to take it one step at a time. so that we can be successful on each step and we can make that difference. You did make me think, though, a little bit about, you talked about not having a seat at the table. The thing,
That's actually, that's going to be the name of the book.
oh, good. Hey, so it's
Well,
perfect. I
actually,
will remember that.
it has two reasons. One is, again,
Uh,
I don't feel that, but the second, as we mentioned, is there's no longer a seat at my table for my mother due to Parkinson.
That's right. And I love that dichotomy of the thoughts of like the person not being here, but you also not being there. And it's interesting because in grief, that is something that does happen. Our lives change, but everybody around us, their life stays the same. So, for instance, as a young widow, what I found is I was no longer a part of all the young couples groups.
Mm.
But I also didn't have a lot of single friends because I was married for 14 years before my husband died. And so I immediately was taken out of that social circle. And then I was a single mom, not a married mom. So then I was taken out of that social circle. And then, you know what I'm saying? And so that's what happens. And then in grief, and then so you're grieving not only the loss of the person, but the loss of all of these connections. And I'm going to write a blog on this in the next couple of days, but really, healing grief comes from connection. It doesn't come from time.
Mm.
And so when you're grieving and then all of these connections are taken from you, then that's exactly you do feel alone. And as a matter of fact, many times you are. And it's very difficult then to find that space to heal.
And the reason I wanted to maybe tell a quick story is because this show is concentrated on grief, but I felt, so a few weeks ago I was asked, I got an email, and as a lawyer, it's like, you get an email with an ad, an invitation, and it was for some board for the World of Parkinson's. I won't say who or what because it doesn't matter. And again, I still support all the organizations. Actually, if you go to togetherforsharon.com, there's a donation link to the Parkinson's Foundation, Michael J. Fox. All that is actually nothing to do with us. They've all really been nice and created a link in my mother's memory. So if you
Oh,
donate, it goes to them. So we do not accept money. So everybody listening, we love you. We want you to know we support you, but we don't want any of your money. It sounds odd because 2024 is always, but wait, there's more like Shark Tank, but there's no more. I just want you to know you're not alone. But so I get this email, the quick story, and I'm writing in depth, and I'm providing all of it in the last book I probably ever do, because it might be a little controversial, but I'm going to break through the walls if I can. I really want all these organizations to have a wing for people who've lost a loved one. They don't have anything right now, in my opinion. So I get this email, says, do this essay. So I literally sat for 3 hours, I had my PhD hat on, and I wrote 3 pages, APA format. I had references. I even put videos and so much stuff. And I figured I'll send it in. If they don't see it, at least they know I'm out there and good. That's it. I don't even want to be. If I don't get it, who cares? There's a lot of people. So I'm done, all excited because it poured my heart into it. I pressed the button. Well, guess what? There's two choices, not three, two. One, you have Parkinson's. Number two, you're a caregiver, and literally says the word alive, and there's no three. So my heart sunk. I felt grieving, and I felt like my mother had just passed away again, and it really
right.
like kind of broke my heart. And I wrote a 200-page book in a week about that and all the experiences I've gone through as an advocate, because I do want everyone to know it hasn't been easy. I've had some. I even had a person, which I'm sharing everything. I had to hire a lawyer, even though I'm a lawyer. Person, and 2 weeks after my mother passed away, I tried to find support on Facebook groups, which was not always the best thing. So
Mm.
this one person who I didn't know thought I was some woman scamming people, which I don't know why, because I don't ask for money. But they actually took my profile page and wrote like fraud, put it online. I had to file a lawsuit. I got it to stop, but they said I wasn't real. My mother never passed away. And here's a guy, just lost his best friend, and I'm like literally falling apart
I
and
am so
angry, and it was horrible. So I'm putting all of that in the book, but the lesson from everything I do like that is no matter a troll, someone you love, or anyone, never, ever, ever let somebody stop you from fighting or doing what you believe. Because I've had doors shut in my face, like this little example with the survey or the paper. But instead of, just giving up, fading away, we've now built togetherforsharon.com into its own world. I mean, when I started, I thought 3 people would see it, and I would have been happy with that. but we've had 40, it says on there 40,000, it's like a little counter, but over
Hmm.
40,000 people have visited the site now and just growing. And sadly, I don't know if it's growing for my work or that the disease, unfortunately, is growing. And more people I'm hearing are being affected, whether it's a neighbor, a cousin, a mailman, a truck driver. And, that might be why so many more people are finally getting involved. And finally, again, I don't have a lot of hope when you talk about politics because everybody's always arguing. But, and sadly, it's a good and a bad. But last December, for the first time in U.S. history, the United States representatives, the House passed the first ever national plan to end Parkinson's disease. It's the first bill in U.S. history. I was a part of it. I spoke with my representative, and now it's actually hopefully heading to the Senate in the next year or two. So you and your listeners can please contact your senators and urge them to support the national plan to end Parkinson's disease, sponsored by and really pushed through by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And it's really the only time I can talk to you live or record and say that you can be part of history. And it's bipartisan, which is beautiful because anyone who doesn't want a cure for the disease, that's a different conversation. I won't get involved.
So speaking of that, so what are the new advancements in treatment for Parkinson's?
Yeah, the biggest one is because of, again, the research and funding by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And I'm not work with them, I'm just a supporter. But they have something called a biomarker that was found last year and it's changed the world. Unfortunately, it's still very evasive. So it's a needle that you can have in your spine. And they believe you can determine if you have Parkinson's. But for someone who's had two major spine surgeries, I don't think, and a third one coming in next month, I don't think I'd want that. So what their real goal is to take that and then next year or soon to be able to offer it in a shot like a blood test and have it in every single office and every doctor in the world, or at least in the US. And that would change the world because now if you know you have it, you can do things, you can make changes, but again, it doesn't cure it. So we still have a long way to go. And I even say once this bill passes, if it does through the Senate and then the president, whoever it is, signs it, that doesn't mean they're going to implement it perfectly. So there's going to be still a lot of work to do, and just nice to know that that's coming. Unfortunately, again, it's not it won't help me and my mother, but it will for so many others. But I still would have liked the sentences. There's actually like 10 pieces of it. It'll help fund research. It'll help those diagnosed. It'll help the caregivers. It'll help population too. But there's still nothing even in that to help the grieving and the people who lost loved ones, which is kind of something that once again, I can't comprehend. I do understand that they don't want to hear a lot. Like there's a chapter in my book I always say to skip, which is the final week of my mother's life because it's tough. But I do have a lot of good things and positive to say. I don't always have to talk about the sad part, which I don't. But even as a guest, like tomorrow, I'm going to a symposium. We have a table. They don't ever. I speak a lot. Like I've probably done 60, speeches and things, but I don't ever get asked by organizations to give speeches at their events. And part of me is okay with it because I'm tired at these. I'd rather speak to the people. Like I wouldn't be able to do well, but it's going to be in the other book. But it is interesting that I'm a professor, and again, I still have a lot to learn. But I'm a professor, lawyer, and I speak, but they don't ask me to speak. So that's one question I'll leave for you in the audience.
Yeah, I think the topics, when you start talking about topics that aren't, we'll say, pretty,
All right.
that's where, you kind of get just sent out to the side because in our society and even in the world, but especially in our society, we like to gravitate to the topics that are fun and make you feel good and,
The puppies and the bunnies.
yes. And you know what? All those things are important because we need happy things in our life.
Right.
The issue, though, is that we have not normalized the fact that things do happen and that grief is out there for everyone and that we all have to help each other. Like I would just said, you don't heal from time, you heal from connection. But
Yeah.
until we normalize the conversation that says, it's okay for me to ask you about your mom, Sharon. As a matter of fact, her name is probably music to your ears.
Yeah, I mean the main thing is really this was all about her. That's why sometimes I don't even want to talk about me because it's not about me. She sacrificed again a lot. She was a school teacher. She had a master's degree and she literally gave it all up to raise me and my brother. And I don't ever forget that. Also, I don't think I would have, the time management skills, the planning skills, the caring skills. And I do forget a lot of times to tell you that I've been an officer since 2006. I'm actually called a reserve because I do it all voluntary. So you wouldn't know the difference if someone pulled you over, not that you ever pulled over, but any,
Oh, I hope
you know,
not, but I'm sure I might have been in the past, but only just for maybe going a little too fast.
my family thinks I'm nuts because, how many people would put a gun badge on completely free, go into very dangerous areas for free for decades. And I don't ever talk about it much, but I did. I would have put my life on the line, and still would for a stranger if it would help save them or help change the child's life or elderly person being neglected. There's a lot of that. And that's just something, again, my mother raised me, morals, ethics from her. I left law firms because they were doing shady, unethical things, and I could have made millions, but I said, I'm not, that's not me. I teach ethics today because of that. But, there's just a lot of things she instilled in me that I hope I can instill in my children. But I just believe in helping others. And if there's someone who, my favorite part of the policing world was serving, Thanksgiving to the people who couldn't afford it or the less fortunate, or driving Santa Claus to the kids for tots, toys
Yeah.
for Todd. Those are my memories of I love, and now it's really even more dangerous, unfortunately. But I feel you have to give back at some times to change the world, and now I shift to this world, which is I love because. Again, I met some incredible people. Not everyone opens the door, but I'm the kind of person that pushes the door open. And, my goal again is really just good hearted. It's to help find a cure. But I think if we had more awareness, that we would have already ended this disease. And till then, I just, in my heart, I don't feel I can stop. Like tomorrow, I mean, how many of us want to sleep? We don't get much time during the week. I'm working 24/7. And then Saturday comes around, I'm going to be getting up at 6 a.m., putting on all my Together for Sharon shirt, we just got, piling up the car and driving to a symposium to talk to hundreds of people just about mom and our journey. And we have people come up to me, they hug me, they cry, and they it just changes my life because I love virtual as I meet incredible people like you and your audience. But being there live is also amazing. We're in Parkinson's Awareness Month this month. We had World Parkinson's Day on the 11th, but to me, Parkinson's disease awareness is literally 24/7 until we find a cure. But then again, we talk about the downhill, and that's my own health because even now I would usually used to work out every day. I don't do it as much because I think there's just more important things like ending this disease, but that's not always the smartest.
Yes,
So,
it's true because you have to
yeah,
take care of yourself. You have three babies that
yeah,
need you, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
no, but what you're doing is I just admire the tenacity that you show each and every day as you're doing this work because I commented on a thing on Twitter the other day, which probably wasn't popular, but someone was complaining about something, and I said, "Well, it's always fine unless it's you're the one person that has that problem. You can dismiss anything you want until you learn that so many people are affected by this problem." And so I really think that we have to fight to show the world all of the ways that we can help one another. And
Yeah.
what you're doing for Parkinson's, I just really am just so proud to have you, talk with me about it today, because again, it's something not only from the grief standpoint that's near and dear to my heart, but for my career of working in skilled nursing. If I saw many, many people at the end of life, and I've saw many, many people with Parkinson's, and it is not an easy disease to live with. So I just am really proud to be a part of your movement. And I do want to thank you for being a police officer. I appreciate everything all the police do for us, and we would not have our country if not for them to keep us safe and to do all the wonderful things that they do for our communities. And my nephew happens to be a police officer, and I know how much he loves it because of making a difference. So I just so much appreciate all of the roles that you have taken on in life. And I know your mom is proud of you because she did raise a really amazing man. So I just hope my son is like loving and caring as you.
No, I
So,
appreciate it, but I still have a lot to learn. And my mother's funny. If she was with us, she'd say, "George, don't do the shows. Go spend time with your family." But then I would tell her I can't do that because I love them, but they also have to. They understand that this is a mission. And we saw again, Parkinson's disease doesn't take a break or a timeout, so I don't feel that I can. And the big thing is I don't have it. So, I don't know. Some days people, they almost challenge me, like, "Why are you doing this?" Or you don't have, but that's not what it's about. If we all join together, work together, learn together, then I again think it would be over. But until then, I still think there's a lot of work to be done.
well, you are making a difference each and every day, and I am so grateful that you are on the show. And like we talked about, my last question I always ask everybody, and this is not going to be our last show, but
No, I
so you have to
appreciate.
start thinking of answers for this. But with that said, what did you do to step into your life with your grief and loss, and how have you been able to transform?
Yeah, I think that again, unfortunately, some people you go through a very, very life-changing situation, and you might, treat it differently. But I decided to take it head on, full force. I didn't want my mother ever to feel alone. I knew when I was there by her side, she at least for a moment could know she was safe. Like that was my biggest thing. I never wanted her to feel. I mean, there were some times she thought there were even aliens in the room and people harming her. Thankfully, she always knew though, when me and the children, even though they were screaming, they were little children, but she loved it. Like that was, we even had a room. We bought her a whole new home. She never got to enjoy it. Unfortunately, it was the last year, but there was a room dedicated because we're really clean people, but that they were allowed to destroy. It was the kids' room, so
Mhm.
she loved going in there and sitting. Even though when she was sick, we would bring her in the wheelchair and she would just watch them and she smiled. She loved Sundays blowing bubbles in the backyard with her grandkids. And that was the one speech I gave. It was only 2 minutes during the Michael J. Fox Foundation to my representative for the National Plan to End Parkinson's. And I fell apart because today when I walk by this, backyard, I don't see that anymore. And that still haunts me too. But what I did want to say is that you need to take the tough times, never let those, like Parkinson's, it can never take away the memories. Like we started with my book. The cover is my mother and I at my wedding, which was one of my favorite days in my life, besides when my children were born. But that was the time where, in those few moments, we danced, we laughed, we just talked and joked, and it was like nothing else in the world existed but that moment. And even now, it's hard sometimes to even look at the or talk about the cover, but that was literally what meant the world to me that moment. And you can see she's actually shining because she's smiling. And
Oh,
uh,
you are bringing tears to my eyes.
sorry, but anyway, that's something that you might have challenges and things, obstacles, but you have to fight through them and just keep fighting. And now I fight in her memory. I do have a little quick statement I always say at every end of anything I do, if you don't mind. This is to you and to your viewers, and this is, I'm sure, us together. But we love you, we support you, we care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I will advocate, along with my friend, the co-host here, Nurse. I will advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I'm just getting started. And I say that because obviously I've been doing it for a little while, but every time I meet somebody like you who impacts and changes my life for the better, every time I speak to, viewers or get comments or emails that, they're struggling and they just want to thank me for being out there, that's what kind of motivates me and makes me want to keep fighting. So again, I'm just so grateful for our time and hope this does continue because I think again grief is something that is out there but not talked about enough. And I have a blog with a young a woman who she actually lost her husband from Alzheimer's the same day I lost my mother from
Oh,
Parkinson's. Obviously she's older. Her name's Betsy, and she's become like my best friend. And we started a little blog. It's called Tackling Tough Topics, where we actually talk about medical marijuana, Death with Dignity Act, which we didn't have in Florida, and that's another show. We don't. My mother was tortured the last 7 days. She had a heartbeat that didn't even breathe, like didn't move, didn't nothing. So she couldn't even acknowledge she was alive. And Florida doesn't have any law. We treat our animals better than our loved ones, and that was, the toughest days of my life. 7 days just waiting to, because again, we didn't know she was going to pass, but then we had kind of had an idea. That was tough. And one last thing is if you go to togetherforsharon.com and you scroll to the bottom, there's a video, and I've been playing guitar half my life just for fun. And we had music therapy for my mother, but some days she was too sick. Well, a week before she passed, I believe, some reason, I don't know why, but I decided, why don't I sit down and play with the music therapist, and you'll hear her singing and me playing guitar with her. My mother was there, but we don't show her because she wasn't doing well. My mother at that point didn't really speak anymore. She couldn't, but we played memories from the Broadway show Cats. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and my mother used to bring me to the Broadway a lot, and I was able to see Cats with my mother, and that was her favorite song. So we actually got a chance to play Memory on, we recorded it. And the only thing I could tell you is at the very end, my mother somehow was able to say thank you, and she loved it. Those were the last words she ever spoke. And that memory, unfortunately, we'll never be able to relive it, but we have it now on this website. And those are the kind of things that I believe that togetherforsharon.com is about. Again, we're completely free and not a foundation of just one person, one son who lost his best friend, who is mother, and I never want her to be forgotten. So again, just grateful for you, your family, your time, and your audience. And again, we send our love to.
Thank you so much. And we do. We remember Sharon Riff Ackerman today as we do this interview in her honor. So we are doing this today in her honor. And so thank you. So as George said, if you want to find his website, it's togetherforsharon.com. We'll link it at the bottom. I'll also put his Instagram on because he's got some really great posts that I've really enjoyed looking at, and I think you can learn from. And then anything else, George, we'll link down below so that people can get the right resources. But this is such a very important topic, and I am grateful that you took a Friday evening with me. And we will definitely talk again. So everyone, thank you for joining Step Into Your Life, and we will journey together.